Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how top experts sell their ideas, their value, and their services. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want better clients, bigger deals, and higher fees. Let's talk about confidence. Confidence, I think, is really, really important. Well, I have the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Mike Acker, author of Speak with Confidence. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much, David. Looking forward to talking with you and really giving some great pointers and understanding to all of your audience.
So let's talk about the Mike Acker story. Give us a quick snapshot of what brought you to the work that you're doing today, and then what were some interesting stops along the way professionally?
Yeah, so there's probably 4 pivotal points. I had a speech impediment as a kid that I overcame. I moved to Mexico and had to be a Spanish second language, so SSL, not ESL, and was terrified, psychomatic fevers, all kinds of different things that would happen during that time. Overcame that, eventually got settled into my identity there, moved back to the United States, made all kinds of blunders, became a national debater, and did a whole bunch of work there, really put time and effort into learning how to be a public speaker. Then, after 18 years of nonprofit and then sales, I moved into what I do now, speaking, writing, and coaching on speaking, because of that sort of an accident. I wrote a book, my first book, and it took off. And then from there, it just kept on growing and growing.
And what was the original book that kicked things off?
Yeah, it's actually behind me. This was Speak with No Fear. That was the original one. And it was full of stories and anecdotes about my own life and such. And then from there, I actually really worked on the framework for Speaking with Confidence, which is the book that Wiley just picked up and published just this last year.
Very, very nice. So talk to us a little bit about, you have a framework in the Speak with Confidence book that not only about overcoming fear, which is kind of like the initial, hey, let's get you up there and let's get you talking, but the framework for really effective communication, effective presentations. Can you walk us through that framework?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're looking to be a great communicator, confident communicator, you're an authoritative communicator, whatever kind of adjective you want to put in front of that, there's going to be 3 parts. So you can look at this like a Venn diagram, 3 overlapping circles. Now that top circle is identity, the left circle is going to be your messaging, and the right circle is going to be your skills. In other words, when you are going into speaking or you're looking at your own speaking, you're thinking, what could make me better? There's 3 different circles that can make you better. Another way of looking at this is 3 different legs on a 3-legged stool. And you need all 3 legs to make you powerful, to make you effective. Think about it. If you don't have one, you're going to wobble. You're going to fall down. If you only have one, then you're really in precarious. Now, here's what most people do is they say, I want to be a better speaker. And so I just need to learn some tips and some tricks. I just need to learn, in other words, skills. And it's true. Learning how to pause and using your hands and your facial expressions and modulating your tone and volume and pace and all these different things. Those are great skills. There's about 55 different skills that I've identified. And all of those will make you better. But that's just the external aspect of speaking. The other aspect of speaking, and most people acknowledge this, is, okay, it's my messaging. It's my thoughts. It's what I'm putting together. It's the content that I'm delivering to other people. And then the third, and this is the one that most people, and I don't know of any books that really go into this besides my book, and it's really your identity, who you are. And who you are is extremely, extremely relevant to how you come across as a speaker.
And so you actually written a whole separate book on identity, correct?
Right. This is a little identity workbook. It actually really complements Speak with Confidence. So the idea is that, hey, you're diving into Speak with Confidence and you're looking at your identity and you just want to dive in a little bit more. And if you go to content.mikeacker.com, and I know you're going to put that in the show notes, you can actually go to a values tool that I've created as well, some other things from that book.
Nice. That's awesome. So I want to kind of break down the mechanics of how we do this, because of course it's easy for you and me who have mastered to some extent some of these things: confidence, certainty, identity, presence. And it's just like, okay, well, just work on your identity. You can do it, go, go, go. And that's kind of like the motivational, very surface level. I know that you go much, much deeper with your clients and your audiences. Can you give us just a little bit of the initial toolkit when a client comes to you and says, Mike, you know what? I'm not that confident. I don't like getting up in front of groups. I do it because maybe it's part of my job as an executive or an entrepreneur, but I'm just not feeling it. It's just not me. Now, when someone says it's just not me, to me, that's the red flag about, oh, that's an identity disconnect. How do you start unpacking that with a client?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually love using the example from the movie Hitch with Will Smith. So in that movie, he takes great guys, good hearts, good desires, good intentions. He doesn't deal with jerks. He deals with good guys. They don't have a great external presence. So their internal identity is pretty darn good, but they don't have a good external presence. They don't have a way to show themselves off. And so he takes this one guy shoe shopping and he puts on these shoes. The guy says, I don't know, these shoes just aren't me. And Will Smith says, you bought these shoes. You look good in these shoes. Use a flexible concept. Now, what he's not talking about is his identity. In other words, he actually wants to keep the man who he is on the inside. He just wants him to have more display, more confidence, more belief in himself. So I'm not looking to change people. And so very beginning of what we do is, instead of trying to change people like, hey, we need to change you, we actually need to get rid of the mentality that you need to change the personhood. We do need to change how you look and how you sound and what words you're putting together one after another. So the very beginning of my work with somebody always starts with an assessment. Where are you strong? What kind of belief do you have in yourself? Maybe you already have a great belief, but you just are really bad with your messaging, or you're really bad with skills. Maybe you're great with your skills, but you have this constant nagging imposter syndrome that pulls you down. So it always starts out with an assessment. And then, regardless of where we are, we're going to go through the framework by going through identity, message, skills. But hey, if their identity is pretty solid, we're going to walk through that relatively quick. If their messaging is pretty solid, we're going to walk through that relatively quick. So I customize it because not everybody needs a cookie cutter way of going through something. But we're always going to start from the inside, who you are, your heart, to your head, what you say, and then your hands, how you say it. And what I love to do is all three of them at first. So we use speeches that are going to help them process their identity. And then they're going to organize their thoughts. Then once we kind of process the identity and they're doing personality profiles and they're studying themselves and they're reflecting on all these different aspects. And a lot of it's covered in the book, and how to deal with rejection and criticism, et cetera, et cetera. And then we process, how do you organize your thoughts? And then we just really finesse that external appearance.
That's so powerful. I think one common theme with some public speaking coaches is no one's really afraid of speaking. I mean, we speak every day. We speak with our family, we speak on Zoom, we speak in the office, we speak with clients. So when we're up on the stage, it's not actually the fear of speaking. It's the fear of judgment. It's the fear of rejection. It's the fear of, what if I mess up? What if I'm not as good as the executive that just came before me? What if I'm not as good as the professional speaker who has all these amazing stories and is a Nobel Prize winner, etc.? So in my opinion, it's not really fear of speaking. It's fear of all these other things: judgment, negativity, criticism, being made to feel less than. Now, I realize that this gets in a little bit of psychology, but how do you unpack some of that fear of judgment, fear of criticism, fear of not being liked, fear of not doing well?
Sure. So actually what's happening with that stage is doing what you're talking about. We have those kind of things on a regular basis, a fear of judgment, et cetera. But when we get on stage, it does two things. The stage does two primary things that relate to the fear of public speaking, or taking away speaking with confidence. And one is it magnifies our insecurities. Now, we all have insecurities. But even as I show up here with you, there's different insecurities that I might have. I might be like, oh, I don't like my beard. It's too thin. And hey, I look at myself in the mirror and I think about that. And it's like, well, okay, it's my beard. It's too thin. But then I go up in front of one person and that now I'm talking to David and I'm like, oh man, but what if David thinks my beard is too thin? So we have that kind of insecurity. And we carry those on around through us all the time. And we look at someone else, they go, well, that person's beard is fantastic. My beard isn't as good. Now, when we go up on stage, that insecurity gets magnified. So whatever it might be, and all those ones that you're not even conscious of. So for example, I'm using the silly example of my beard. But if I get up on stage and the guy before me had this luxurious, amazing beard, and the other guy is extremely clear cut, I go up and go, well, I don't look like that guy. I don't look like that guy. They might think this about me. So it's magnifying the insecurities that we have. It's magnifying the sense that I don't match up. It's magnifying the sense that I don't belong. It's magnifying what's already there. Now, how do you get rid of that? This is where it comes into identity. You need to deal with your insecurities off stage so you're not bringing them with you on stage. And you need a process to deal with that perceived, received, or personal criticism. The other thing that the stage does is it causes you to shift your identity. So you talked about that comparison. And so all of us in our mind have a certain way that we think we should do things. So we grew up and we were parented in such a fashion. And as a result of that, we think, oh, I should be like my parents, or we think I should do the opposite of my parents. So our upbringing, that nurture environment, causes us to think that's the right way of parenting. Now, what happens when you get married? Well, often what happens, and now you have a kid, is say the dad thinks that you should do this with the kids, and the mom thinks you should do this with the kids. And so there's that conflict that's happening right there. And you're trying to hold, and which one's better? Which idea is better? Often it's not one is better than the other. It's just different. That's what happens with speaking. So you grow up and you have that mentor or that teacher or that coach or that pastor or that radio personality or that podcaster or whatever it is. And you watch that CEO, your boss, your manager, your influencer, your friend who you admire, and you go, that's what a public speaker is. That's what a presenter looks like. And you go up and you shift your personality. You shift your personhood. You try to become someone other than you are. But anytime that you're trying to imitate someone else, you're just going to be a poor version of them. And so we don't want to magnify our insecurities. We don't want to shift our personhood. We don't want to try to be someone else. We want to really deal with ourselves and then become the best version of ourselves.
Are you loving this interview as much as I am? Holy smokes. Hey, you know what this reminds me of? There's a fantastic sales book that you got to get your hands on right here, right now. It's called Do It Selling. How do I know it's great? Well, I wrote it and you need to read it. Pop over right now to doitselling.com. Now, back to our interview. Yes. Well, speaking of wanting to imitate others and then also not being happy with kind of what's going on off stage, to me, those kind of combine into imposter syndrome. And I know you've got some thoughts on imposter syndrome, which to my mind never really goes away. It can certainly be managed. It can be minimized. But what are some of your best advice on imposter syndrome? Who am I to stand up here? Who am I to be the keynote speaker? Who am I to present in a sales mode to these very important people who probably make more money than me, drive a fancier car than me, they're more successful than me? All of those imposter syndrome factors. How do we handle that?
Yeah, so ultimately imposter syndrome, at the root of it is value. I'm not as valuable as they are. So I just got promoted and I'm not as valuable. I'm launching out to be an entrepreneur and I'm going to sell my services. I wrote a book. I'm standing on stage and I'm just not as good as they are. I'm not as valuable as they are. I just came back from an event. I was speaking to an event on Friday alongside Michael Hyatt and Hal Elrod and Amy Porterfield. These are some big names and they've sold way more books than I have sold. I've sold a lot of books and have lots of books. But Michael Hyatt, I mean, that's a big name. I was 3 hours after Michael Hyatt. And so who am I to be on that? So it's an issue of value. What's my value? Or you're speaking to the C-suite executive team. And this happens with a lot of my clients. They're in the professional field. And they're like, who am I to do that? Or maybe you wrote a book and it was self-published, and you're like, it's self-published, it's not as good as traditional publishing. So it's an issue of value. But ultimately, where does value come from? It doesn't come from that external label. So really go through and look at your value. So actually, I write about this in Speak with Confidence. I talk about a ladder of value, like 5 different rungs of the ladder of value. And I'll just quickly go through it. It's in my book. It's like the 5th chapter or something like that. But at the bottom rung, it is valuable, is what we make, what we have, our financial situation, our socioeconomic status. Now, that is a rung of value. Having more stuff and having more money does add value to your life. It's just extremely bottom rung. Unfortunately, we put it at the top rung often. So we flip it and we make it, oh, that person has more. Elon Musk has everything. So, he's extremely valuable. No. That's bottom rung of that. Now, if everything else is equal, but I have all of this and you don't have this, it does add some value to my life because it opens up doors to me. It allows me to do things. Doesn't make me intrinsically valuable, but externally valuable. So the second one is where we come from. It's our affiliations. It's our pedigree. So I graduated from Harvard and you went to community college. Now the community college person goes, oh, I'm around all these Harvard people. I literally had a client who's like, all these people are Ivy League and I'm a self-made person. I did this, this, and this. And so they just didn't feel the value. Now, once again, there's value in that. There's value in that alumni association. There's value in that pedigree. There's value that you work for Fortune 50 company. There's value there. But it's one of the bottom rung values. Then the next rung is what you've done and what you've accomplished. And that provides value. Look, I did this, this, and this. But fortunately, that one goes away. People don't want to know what I've done. They want to know what I'm doing. And often it's like, oh, I did this, this, and this. And we get this old timers thing, right? Well, I did this and this. And what do the new timers think about? Well, cool, good for you. There's a value. Yeah, good for you. But what are you doing now? Well, I'm retired. I'm doing this and this. And like, cool. And unfortunately, that goes away. The next one is, what am I doing now? And now we're getting to value. Okay, so you just got promoted and everybody else are millionaires already. Everybody else comes from Ivy League college. Everybody else has done this for 20 years. You're doing it now. Guess what rung you're on? The same one they are on. And the last one, and the most important, is who you belong to now. In fact, there's people with extreme high amounts of the 4 rungs of values, but they don't have the last one. And then there are people who have very little of the 4 below ones, but have high on the top. And when they die, who's richer? The person who is loved and cherished and dies with people who love them sincerely. I remember I was with someone and his wife was dying in front of us. And they'd been married for nearly 30 years. Now, he had some stuff, but not just everything. And he came from a couple associations, but nothing prestigious. Nothing like you'd be like, oh my gosh, that's her pedigree. He had done some things, good things, helped people. And he was still currently contributing and adding value to people's lives. But you know what? When he died, or when his wife died, the lobby of the hospital was packed. Everybody came out. His daughter drove 5 hours. And when he said goodbye to her after she passed, he kissed her on the forehead. And he said, thank you for a wonderful 35 years. Now that person's rich. And shortly after that, he processed that a couple of years later. He found another incredible person. That's value. And often what we do in the moment is we flip the rungs upside down and we go, oh my gosh, they have more than me. Oh my gosh, they come from a more prestigious background. Oh my gosh, they've done so much. No. Flip it in the right perspective. Go in and go, who's your support system? Who are you? What do you belong to? And what are you doing now? And when you have those 2 things right there, you're as valuable as anybody else in the room.
Wow. Really, really powerful. And I love what you said, Mike, about with your story about the husband who lost his wife. He had some stuff. It's like that is so often that top rung, right? It's the myth of that top rung and just that throwaway line. Yeah, he had some stuff, but whatever. that's not what brings us joy. That's not what brings us significance. That's not what impacts other people in our lives and in our world. So what a great perspective shift. Well, tell us a little bit about rejection. I know that one of your tenets is that rejection is not to be avoided. It's not some big scary thing. Rejection is actually essential. Why is rejection essential?
Yeah, rejection, when taken the right way, makes you stronger. Often what happens is this, that we actually have very soft skin and hard heart. And so we're kind of cynical and we just take things in. It's like, oh man, this is tough. And then we become cynical and like, oh, the world's out to get me, victim mentality, critical, judgmental. What we want to have is really tough skin and soft hearts. And really rejection, if you have tough skin, it's harder to get through you. It's harder to get into you. But how do we get tougher skin? It's like calluses, right? By doing it again and again and experiencing it and responding to it the right way. If you play guitar, you're going to start getting calluses on your finger. And then you're like, oh man, this is really tough. It hurts. I'm done. Well, you're not going to get the calluses you need to keep on continuing. Likewise for rejection. A lot of times people get rejected, they get hurt and they run away and then they just stay soft-skinned. But rejection is so crucial. Yeah, I read the reviews for my books and I have 17 books and workbooks and I have thousands of reviews at this point in time. And some of them are mean. And I don't like reading them, but I make myself read them. And sometimes I'll actually read them and when I'm speaking at an event or training at an event, and I'll talk about how to process that. And they're just flat out mean. Like nobody would say that to your face, but because it's on Amazon or Target or wherever they say it. Here's what happens with rejection. When you get tough skin, then it allows you to keep that soft heart. The poison of those external words doesn't make you doubt your worth. So someone says your book is trash. Okay, tough skin. All right, soft heart. My favorite story about rejection comes from a guy who self-proclaimed said he's really ugly. So as he was growing up, he said, I was just an ugly guy. And like no one else, all my friends were attractive. I was the ugliest of all my friends, but I liked girls. So I'd ask him out and they'd say no. And it hurt, but I kept on asking him out. Do you want to date? How about this girl, that girl? And he said, I asked out so many girls that it almost became a game. And I just couldn't get a girl. And everybody else was dating. I couldn't get a girl. And he said, I felt the rejection. But he said, you know what? Eventually I asked, and I worked on other areas of me and worked on that area too, but still not an attractive guy. And I met an incredible woman. And he goes, here's what I realized. When I became a sales professional, that ability to handle rejection made me invincible. Because when they said no, 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 it was just like, all right, next, next, next. And we all know in sales, no means next. And so you just got to keep on going. But if you give up on rejection, you'll give up before you hear your first yes. And so you just got to keep on going. So embrace rejection, handle it. What you do need for rejection is a support system. So that person wasn't alone. He had a support system in his family, and he had support system even with friends. And I have support systems so that when someone says, we don't want your book, we don't want this, that's trash, I have other people who are saying, we value you, we love you. So that support system allows me to handle it.
Yes. Wow. Such a powerful story. Let's go behind the scenes here for a moment, because obviously as a very successful author and a very successful speaker yourself, you came out of the nonprofit world. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was in pastoral ministry and kind of relief agencies.
Mm-hmm. Wow. How about that? So let's talk about selling, because you mentioned kind of sales and selling, and obviously this is the selling show. Coming out of that background and sort of being not a babe in the woods, but a stranger in a strange land. Like, what is all this selling that I hear of? How did you go from ministry, nonprofit work, all of this mission-driven, wonderful impact that you've had? What was easy early on in your sales adventures, and what were some of the challenges that you had to overcome just with sales and selling?
So in pastoral ministry and then in nonprofit relief, lifting kids out of poverty, the reward was impact. I could see the impact. I could see the house that we contributed. I could see the well that we contributed. I could see the person's life being restored and rebuilt and such. And so, wow. I could see the impact. And I did that for almost 18 years, from when I was 20 years old till almost about 38 years old. And one of the things that breaks my heart about when people say about pastors is, they're just in it for the money. I was like, well, I was never in it for the money. And I think I took 3 different promotions that caused me a pay cut each one. So I went through 4 pay cuts in my career. Yay. Now, are there a few outliers that are into it for the money? I'm sure there are. But overall, most people going into some kind of clergy or nonprofit role are going there to make an impact. So after 18 years, I was out with some friends. We were having a barbecue, and I was just looking at my life, just looking at the future, and just thinking I'd like to have some income, a greater amount of income. Instead, we were frugal. We didn't have debt. We had a good plan, Dave Ramsey, financial peace type people. But I just like to maybe take a break for a while and go in to make some income. So I'm at a barbecue. I throw this out there. I'm just kind of talking about it. My friend says, I'd hire you in a heartbeat. Now, I have a book coming out here soon called The 5 Drivers of Success. There's 5 different drivers that make you successful: education, experience, emotional intelligence, speaking, and drive. I didn't have the first 2 at all. I had no education in the space. I had no experience in that space. And yet, when I went through the recruiter process and everything, Fortune 500 company, they said, you're the best candidate out of the hundreds that we talked about. Why? Because I had speaking and emotional intelligence. So I didn't have the other ones, but speaking and emotional intelligence. So I went in there, made all kinds of speaking or selling blunders. Like I tried to sell things that I misunderstood. I didn't fully understand the product. And yet ultimately I took an $800,000 territory, turned it into $4 million the first year, mostly just because of my ability to be with people, emotionally relate to people, and to be able to speak to them and to very clearly, once I did understand things, very clearly delineate why this was valuable. So the common thread between those 2 was in pastoral ministry, I had conviction about what I was saying. In relief work, I had conviction of what I was saying. This is important because we're going to help people do X, Y, Z. And then I was very clear. So this is it. And I had this conviction. Over here in speaking, I had very clear idea of the value that Patterson brought, the company I worked for. Just incredible support, all these extra education. We're really with you. We're your partner on this. And I had conviction of how I could help it better. Like, hey, I'm going to go to bat for you. Now, how does that relate to selling? On one side, I was on impact. One side, I was income. 2 mainstays was I had conviction of what I was doing on both sides, and I had clarity of what I was trying to talk about. So in your selling, think about, why are you selling? Like, and not at the surface level, and not just the below surface, but what's the depth of why you're selling? In other words, why are you able to help people? How do you help people? How does your product, your service, how does it contribute to the betterment of their life? And then what do you really need to say? And really get really clear on that. Now, impact, income, I started writing and coaching on the side just for fun. And then I was able to switch into this full time. And so I've been doing this full time for about 4 years. And I've been doing part time for 20 plus years, but full time. And now I'm able to make an impact. I love when I get to see people's lives, hugely influenced by the work I get to do in my books. And I also get to make a better income than I did as a pastoral clergy member. And I get to serve in the church, and I get to do all of that. So that's what I would tell people. Go back, dive into your why, dive into your what.
Amazing. Right before we turned on the microphones, you mentioned that this speaking event that you just came from, it was generated by another speaking event, which of course we always love. Above and beyond getting rebooked or spin-off business from the speeches that you do, take us back to early days of Mike Acker, professional speaker. What did you do for lead generation? Who were you reaching out to? How was that? What kind of conversations were you booking? How did you kind of bootstrap the speaking side of the business from zero to hero where you are now?
I had a job that paid the bills. So I was selling, right? And then on the side, I started doing things. So the book was the first thing that I did. And actually, not true. The first thing I did is I put my name on a whole bunch of places where you can put your like professional services, like LinkedIn and such, like coaches. And I was charging a dime for the dollar. You know, it was like very little because it's just an extra side hustle, fun. people would be like, pay me. Like I remember even when I wrote my book, I still didn't have any official like prices or anything. So this guy calls me up from buying my book and he said, hey, I just bought your book. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And he goes, yeah, I said, well, did you get it on Amazon or something? He goes, no, I got it at the airport. I'm like, oh, on your Kindle? He goes, no, I got it at the airport. I'm like, oh, so you brought the book with you from home? Because no, I walked into the store and bought your book at the airport. Like, not digitally? Like I couldn't get it. I've never seen my book at the airport, but apparently he did. And so he flew out to meet with me. And once again, I'm totally oblivious. This is like, 4+ years ago. He flew out to meet with me. He's like, so how much is it going to be? I'm like, well, I'll meet you after work and we'll grab a cup of coffee at Starbucks. You can buy my coffee. Cheapest coaching call ever, right? So we meet together and he's talking. He goes, this book has changed my life. Wow, that's really cool. So where do I go with that? After that point in time, I started realizing that I had something and I just started doing everything. So anything that you can potentially think like cold emails, the spam LinkedIn, podcast selling, YouTube, cold or buying speaker list, hiring VAs, hiring multiple VAs, writing lots of books, writing books that are outside of my genre, reaching out to speakers agencies, posting myself every single place. I did everything. I threw a ton of mud at the wall and some of it stuck. So since then, what I've done is actually gone, okay, what do I really need to do? What really works? And now I've really studied it. And I told you beforehand, I bought your book as well, Do It Speaking, when we started talking about this call right here. And now I've really studied what others have done, studied what I've done. And now I have a lot more clarity of what to do. And I actually teach people how to get booked on stages. But at the beginning, what did Mike Acker do? Everything. You name it, I did it. I've probably spent, I don't know, $50,000 on Fiverr and Upwork. And if someone offered their services cold call, I'd be like, yes, let's go for it. And a lot of it was just waste. Most of it.
Now that's great. And I think so many people listening are like, oh my God, Mike, me too. I bought every course. I bought every program, spam on LinkedIn, blog your brains out, tweet this, tweet that, do a ton of video, whatever it is. Holy smokes, so much value in this episode. Listen, if you are loving what you're hearing, feel free to download, subscribe, tell a friend, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to The Selling Show. Now, back to the interview. In your experience, when you're coaching your speaker clients, so it's 2023, in case people are not aware, it is 2023, so update. What works today in this post-pandemic world to get paid speaking opportunities? And what's some of your advice for some of the speakers listening or even some of the executives who speak? What's the smart way to do it that would shortcut all that mud that you had to throw against the wall?
And this actually hits on what you and I just briefly talked about before the show too, is intense focus. What is your USP? What is your unique speaker proposition? What makes you you? What makes you and makes you awesome for others? So it's your branding, that aspect of here's my brand, and a great brand is not just in a world of its own. It's a brand targeted at a specific audience. So, for example, my speaker brand is I help professionals break through barriers to reach greater success. So I just got done speaking to 170 marketers in Kansas City and then 25 people the next day working on sales, same company, helping them break through. And then on Friday, I was speaking to 1,500 authors alongside Hal Elrod and Michael Hyatt and a few others. And the same type of deal. I'm helping people break through. So that's my go-to. And what that does is it helps you get really focused. Now, once you know what you're good at and what you're doing, then you look through what audiences should I be going for? Where are my people? They might be on Facebook. They might be on Twitter. They might be in this area. They might be on that area. And then you craft a signature talk that really delineates those two. And then after you craft that signature talk, you master the heck out of it. So my best leads are ones that I get off the stage and they go, wow, that was killer. Let's go do something else. And so I help people do that, master their talk, master their delivery. And then at the very beginning, you got to get their ball rolling, but that's where you know your ideal target and your brand and you marry them together. And then I actually have a speaker agency that I have reach out on behalf of my clients as well. So it's that full package. Let's help you identify who you are. Let's help you master it and create an awesome signature talk. Let's help you find your audience, and we'll help you reach out to them as well.
Wow. Very, very nice. So let's talk about the Mike Acker empire here as we start to land the plane. What are the different ways that you help people? What are the different revenue streams in the business as it is today?
Yeah. So all of what I do helps people realize their potential. That is my mission in life. I help people realize their potential. So how do I do that? I do it through my books. I have several different books. And by the way, remember I told you I threw mud at the wall? There are a couple books that don't fit my brand because I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
So I wrote books that I wouldn't have spent time writing. And I was like, well, that's a waste of time. But I wrote them. And a lot of people are like, well, should I write a book? I'm like, well, it depends. What's your speaker brand? What's your USP? Not everybody needs to write a book. And some people do, some people don't. Some people write the wrong book. Some people wrote a book, but that's not the book that they should speak off of. So ultimately, that's one way I help people. And then I have my coaching that is really for that professional breaking through a barrier. And usually that's a mid to high level. So among those ones are CEOs of companies that you would know of, people who belong to some prestigious companies that are at the very top that I can't mention, some minor celebrities, some politicians, a UFC heavyweight champion that I can talk about, Stipe Miocic, an NFL coach that I can't talk about. So there's several different people that I've just worked with that are just absolutely amazing. And then lots of people who are just, hey, I'm in marketing. I'm a VP. I need some help. I help them break through. So coaching for them just to break through the barrier, and then books for any kind of anybody, you can get them for 99 cents sometimes, right? And then the real passion is helping people do what I'm doing, helping them become that speaker and then representing them. And so it's called Speaker Brand. And then Audacity Speakers is the agency aspect of that. So that's the whole aspect, helping people break through and realize their potential.
Very cool. Now, the speaker agency, that is primarily outreach on behalf of your clients, correct?
Right. So I had a client who signed up with me to become a public speaker. I vet people. I don't just take anybody. So I got to make sure that I got to believe that we can get them booked, right? And they might not have it yet. They might be like, oh, I just, I say too many ums and stuff, but I listen to them. I'm like, do you have value? And do you have drive? And have you been successful somewhere? So say I have a doctor who, or for example, one of the gentlemen I'm working with, he's a pro at what he does. He's awesome. He's hardworking. He's not a great speaker yet. So we're working on him being an awesome speaker. And as a result of that, we've already got him booked for one event. And then we actually have two more events that we're actually in the middle of conversations for him. And that's from our network, our relationships, and then our outreach.
Very, very cool. Well, Mike Acker, this has been so great. I know that you've got some resources, some things that we're going to put in the show notes directly under this episode at bestsellingshow.com. Tell us, where can we send people? What resources and links can we provide so they can get connected and stay connected to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're looking at being a speaker, go to speakerbrand.com. You'll find right where a lot of those things I've talked about is right there. Or you can go to mikeacker.com if you want my book for my coaching or to do some kind of work together. So two different places. David, has been absolutely awesome being with you. I'm so excited. I got your book. I was already getting into it and going, man, this is great stuff. So great job. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Absolutely. And we're going to have, I think it's a link to book a chat with you, and then also some resources and some cool things that people can get absolutely free, correct?
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome. Mike Acker, you're a rock star. I appreciate you. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Really appreciate it, David.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.